Hi everyone, so it's Greg and Mira, or Mira and Greg again, and today we're going to talk about freedom of speech and so the importance of the word. And what's really interesting is to see a little bit what's the line between freedom of speech and hate speech and who is deciding about this line. I was thinking that maybe this episode could be very short because I think that Greg and me, we agree that there is no freedom of speech in most of the cases. So we could just say, that's it, it's done. No need to discuss it. But I think that we
We don't
have
even
some
need to
very
talk
good.
about speech. There will be no
Yeah,
speeches
no.
of freedom of speech.
So let's bring some examples from US and Europe and also some other countries and see what is freedom of speech and who is violating it and how it's being violated or how it's being promoted in some cases. So just on an optimist note.
Mm,
So yeah, Greg, your turn.
your turn. So, I guess the reason we decided we're going to have this discussion is I consider myself a freedom of speech advocate. I don't know if I'm necessarily what do they call that? A freedom of speech internalist, or I don't know. There's like a term where all you believe, everything you believe has to do with freedom of speech, and there's no rules or no rights to abridge freedom of speech. Maybe a constitutionalist. I don't know. I try to that I'm a freedom of speech absolutist, and I have to say I'm not, because one, I don't think freedom of speech is entirely free as it's supposed to be, and I recognize there are probably some points that the law has come to determine are wrong in this argument. You shouldn't be able to threaten people, or you shouldn't be able to defame somebody to a point of where you're hurting their perception, or the perception people have about them. But this is such a great topic because there has to be a place, I think, Mary, you jump in anytime, where freedom of speech should have as much power as possible. Criticizing your government is clearly the number one time that everything that you say in speech should be allowed and protected. But
Yeah.
even with that there has to be a point where you can't just call your government out and out, call them out for out and out, I don't know, conspiracy theories or something. There has to be a handle on truth before speech is allowed and protected. I don't know.
No, I think it's very complex in the sense that I mean, me having worked with UN organizations and other international organizations all this year, I'm very fond of, because I bring it always, I'm very fond of the international conventions, and because as much as they might be weak or not functioning every time and everywhere, but I think that sometimes they are the best thing that we have in order to protect some rights. So there is freedom of speech. It's a specific article in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also on the European Convention for Human Rights, and also in the Inter-American Convention for Human Rights that I'm not sure if US has ratified it. I think no. Anyway, but I think that also Canada has not ratified it. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's mostly the countries in the Latin America that have ratified this convention. And the case of US is very specific because the freedom of speech, if I refer to the Constitution, it's full, like in paper. And that was something that I was quite perplexed in the beginning, because I was saying that I was thinking, or I still think, because I don't have a very clear idea. But I mean, let me just throw my ideas here and then we can discuss. So I was thinking that you cannot have this full freedom of speech in the paper, because then you have hate speech. So how to manage this? I mean, you cannot allow to everybody to say whatever they want, because they are spreading hate, etc., etc. On the other side, the other argument is that who is deciding what is allowed and not allowed, because we're social and social beings. So and we know that what's good and what's bad changes, which is really unfortunate, because to my mind, that maybe this is very absolutist for me to say this, but there are some things that there are good and bad, and that it's known, like you cannot harm someone else. So that's the thing that there is not you cannot discuss it. So but on the other side, if you allow some people to decide on what's permitted and what's not permitted, then you always risk to have a kind of authoritarian and biased and not fair like decision on it. So when we were discussing yesterday, I said that as a feminist I'm a fervent, no, is it a word in English, or I'm saying it in French? Yes. Yeah. So I'm a fervent protector of freedom of speech, because I think that, and I believe like that women has been violated this right for years and years and years. So, and I think that also, the idea of saying to women, oh, you have to protest, but in a very polite way. So not saying, not swearing, not saying, not being aggressive, etc., etc. For me, it goes within this kind of not like shutting the voices. So if I was to choose between having a full freedom of speech, I would choose it. And I would say like to women.
That's a great question. I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but I guess that's
please.
Great question. If I were to choose the level of freedom of speech, and I'm not suggesting you answer, you just answered, but just offering that question to the individual, I think that's an interesting place to start, because you're not going to have 100%, alliance with anybody. There's going to be every different opinion under the sun. Absolute freedom of speech, no freedom of speech. I mean, it depends on, I guess, a lot of where you come from and what you're about. But it's interesting. So absolute freedom of speech. Let's play that for a second. What does that look like? So how would you use your absolute freedom of speech?
I mean, I was thinking, and maybe I would be a very bad feminist by saying this, but okay, I'm assuming. So, no, not I'm assuming. Oh my goodness, I said it in French. I take full, or in French it's like j'assume. No, I would say that I take full responsibility also of being a very bad feminist on saying that, but...
So I j'assume full of responsibility.
Okay, j'assume. I was, recently there was this case of the Tate brothers being like moving to US, etc., etc. I don't know if you know these two guys, Andrew Tate and his brother, etc. Okay. It's like these are two, I don't know if they are in TikTok or somewhere, but apparently two huge influencers who are very misogynistic and saying horrific things for women, very like humiliating and like degrading things about women.
Okay.
So the idea is, should we allow these people to talk or not? Now, because they are saying these horrific things about women. So, which is, for me, it's completely disgusting, and I would prefer...
Just as disgusting as something was said about men, right?
Of course. Like, disgusting is against... I mean, the problem for me is I don't want anyone to say disgusting things against other humans at all. But as we know, we don't live in this fantastic world, so yes, this is the reality. So, in order to fight Andrew Tate, I would prefer not to shut him, how do you say it? Shut him off? Yeah. For saying he has been imprisoned for other crimes like human trafficking, etc. So I'm not talking about this. I'm just talking about the speech, which is for me a hate speech. But I would prefer not to shut him down, but instead to fight him by using social media or, I don't know, TV or other channels and show people or young men that apparently are being so much influenced by him that he is wrong. So I would prefer this thing. For me to have the freedom of speech to fight the Andrew Tates of everywhere and not being shut. Of course, I still think that this might be a little bit idealistic because the hate that I would get, especially being a woman, would be even greater. But you have, I mean, this is the world. You have to fight and to use the right of freedom of speech to fight. I don't know if I can bring an example. I mean, I'm talking a lot, but just to bring this example that I love from a feminist, a US feminist, she was in her memories about the feminism in US in the 60s, when she was talking about all the protests that against Miss America and everything that was being done at the time. And she was saying that we were against going to the televisions or talking to the media because we were saying that revolution should not be televised. And then the space of talking and the space of speech was being taken by some other people that were against feminism. So I think that as much as possible, we have to use this space that we have.
So you're saying that freedom of speech is your tool, or if you want to go this direction,
One of the tools.
your weapon to fight ignorance or hate speech or any type of pressures to change people's beliefs that are contrary to yours. Okay, I agree with that. And it's interesting when you first started, you opened up with the idea that you can't say too much because of your history and your the employment that you've had before. That kind of struck me as funny because, I'm an American. I believe in free speech. I was in the military. And I recall literally to the day swearing allegiance to the Constitution. When you finish boot camp, you have to actually go through this ceremony where you swear allegiance to the Constitution. But as a military member, we're not allowed freedom of speech. We have those rights suppressed or out and out removed. That is, when you're in uniform, or you can't even speak to the effect that you are an active military member or even police member. Because once you move to those positions, your speech is restricted. And I don't know if I understand that so well. It seems like people who are in the military or the police, who are part of the government establishment, they have the greatest level of insight of what the government is actually doing. So limiting their freedom of speech seems to me the worst violation of freedom of speech. I mean, I recall back in the when there were police protests about certain political events, and the police were getting punished because they were attending these events and they were not supposed to have any preference on political opinions. And that seems to be so ridiculous that once the government has somebody working for them or a large organization, then their rights are entirely stripped away just so that particular government can maintain power. And it seems like that is the biggest violation of the First Amendment, in my opinion, but, I don't make any rules. So going back to would you say that you're a freedom of speech absolutist? So you're saying you're heavily invested in the idea of freedom of speech, as I am, but I'm just trying to find there has to be a line where we can't just say whatever we want. And I don't know what that line is, to be perfectly honest. I hear,
Well,
Go ahead.
no, that's the problem. Who is deciding about the line? So
Yeah, that is always going to be a problem. And it seems like it's always going to be government taking advantage of their position. And it's not, I say that in such a illogical manner. It's not government. It's not government. Just to put that blanket statement out there is wrong, and I apologize. I apologize, government. It's the individuals who are working in the seats of government at the time. I say, one of the greatest examples I had, we were talking earlier, there's a small town in Mississippi, where a local newspaper, and this happened last year in another small town someplace in the United States, a newspaper wrote an article about a vote from the city council where they had a 2.5-minute vote where they were going to consider new taxes. And they apparently, they seemingly hid it from the media by not inviting particular news sources to come to this particular meeting, the 2.5-minute meeting. And after the newspaper had found out about it and published it, the city sued the newspaper. And the incredible thing to me is that the judge allowed this case to because a judge can look at a case and just dismiss it, right offhand. But this judge accepted the case. The hypocrisy and tyranny, from my perspective, seems obvious, and it seems so wrong that the judiciary, and the executive branch swung directly in, and the legislative branch, all three swung right into action to stop this newspaper. They tried to have the article had already been published. They couldn't take it back, but they basically sued the newspaper and said, you can't tell the truth about what the government is doing. And again, for me, the ridiculous part is the judge actually took the matter up. And then after it went to the news and the rest of the United States heard about it, and then the judge had to stop and say, I'm going to get criticized now. So now that it's affecting me, I'm going to go back and let this newspaper have their freedom of speech back. I think that is tyranny. I think that is a ridiculous abuse of power. And now this judge still sits on the bench. She'll have a bad reputation for a day or two, but then she's going to go back to those same horrible judgments. And I only say she because she's a woman, but this judge has taken her power and abused it just by taking up the case. So when we look at violations of freedom of speech, I think the mechanisms are in place. It just comes down to the individuals who find themselves in that momentary position of power, and they'll do whatever they can, to prop themselves or their advocates up. I wish this judge would be removed. I wish he'd be impeached and removed from the bench entirely. We don't need people like that who can't even recognize the obviousness of the First Amendment to make any other type of judgments over her fellow humans or fellow constituents. It's appalling to me.
But isn't it illegal in US? So, isn't this the First Amendment of the Constitution, like the full freedom of speech, differently from all the other countries in the world?
By definition, it is illegal for this judge to, you could make the argument that she was just looking at the case to find the merit. But the merit is baked right into what the judgment was. The city sued a newspaper for releasing information about their commission or their city council meeting, That is illegal. But there's no repercussions for this judge. It would take the state senate to remove her from the bench, and that's first that's a waste of time and waste of money. They should be spending their time and energies on actual good legislation. So it'd be a huge waste of money to get rid of her. Plus it would never work. And she's just going to sit on the bench habitually. Judges, just like police officers, police officers have immunity from law, and judges have absolute immunity from the law. Meaning they can break the law on the bench, be found. You have to basically find it extraordinarily obvious that they attempted to break the law, because which is a difficult to find proof and evidence of such a thing.
Shouldn't the law be equal for all?
Okay, now you're going to bring out your idealism again.
No, I'm sorry. That should be the first thing in the Constitution. I know that we're all living in the animal farm of George Orwell, where we're all equal, but some are more equal than the others. So I know that, but still it upsets me.
That's my point. The law states emphatically what the rules are.
Yeah.
It's when those that are seated in positions take advantage of their position and openly break the law. That's the thing that we can't easily fix right now. Because the whole idea of democracy is you vote for an individual. Judges are voted in some cases. I don't know if the case here, but they're either appointed by an elected official or they're voted into office. And once they're voted in, it's like they have freedom to do whatever they want, regardless of what the people want. So the system in place seems like it's built to be exploited, and that's exactly what people are doing. Once they get into those positions, they exploit those positions. So I think freedom of speech exists on paper. It's just, does it exist in the real world?
Yeah. And from what you say, and I also wanted to ask you, how did you feel when you were in the army about the freedom of speech? And is it like a conflict or an internal conflict, especially because you have to follow some rules? And I think this is also the same in politics. Like, I had a very, very short experience in politics, and I think that was one of the main reasons why I'm happy that I left, because you have to follow some rules, and your speech has to adapt to the structure and to the institution where you are. I really prefer this kind of independence, if I could say, which is not a full independence, because I work for different institutions, etc. And I try to not harm the others. As long as we're the others and we're collaborating, there cannot be full independence. That's for sure. How were you feeling when you were in the military?
So, thank you for specifying the military and not the army. I was never in the army.
Okay, sorry. I know the difference.
We should all know. Actually, at the time, I didn't have an opinion on it. And, if we want to go to Orwellianism, Animal Farm talk, we all have rights and some of us have more rights. It makes me think, if somebody is in a position, like working for the government, shouldn't they have I don't want to say that out loud. Well, let's for argument's sake, should they have more rights than somebody else? I mean, that person has already proven themselves to have a certain amount of capability, analytic or physical, and they've already proven their motivations. They're joining some particular organization. Should they have more rights of freedom of
No,
speech? Seems why not? If I work for
no,
the
we're
government,
all equal.
see, but that's yeah, okay, I agree. I do agree. But my point is that maybe or definitely individuals working for the government shouldn't have more rights, but that doesn't mean they should have less rights either. I think
Yes.
the idea that government officials are not allowed to speak about your opinions or not allowed to speak about the internal workings of the government, that is, the antithesis of the goal of the government to work for the people. And no, there shouldn't be, people that have a greater level of freedom of speech in that respect, but there has to be some way for the people that have a greater understanding of the government to be able to communicate that to their constituency, or even if they're not an elected official and they just they work for the government, they shouldn't be restricted on what they can say to people. They should still have their same rights, but that's just not the case either. In fact,
No.
if you go to a government official and ask an opinion, they'll, oh, I can't talk about that. Well, why not? Because the government says I can't. Oh, well, you could always, talk about it. Well, you'll get fired, right? You'll get removed and dismissed. I think the freedom of speech should incorporate more than just people complaining about the government, but also should be incorporated into the level of communication that people working in the government have an obligation to communicate to others.
That would be great.
Your boy Elon Musk, he asked the most simple question of government workers: give me a list of 5 things you did this week. I think that should be perpetuated. I think every government worker should have to give a report card of what they're doing on the daily, weekly, so we know what they're doing instead of exploiting
And
me and wasting my money.
don't you think that they have done it before Elon Musk was there?
No, I think
Of
it's
course, they have done
been
it.
suppressed.
In other countries, they do it. So he's not saying something so smart. Come on.
Oh, get real. Get real.
No. And he talks about freedom of speech. He was not happy to about the SNL when Mike Myers played him. He was not happy at all. So isn't it freedom of speech to make fun of him? Come on.
Does freedom of speech mandate that you're supposed to like when somebody makes fun of you?
No, just let people do whatever they want to do and make fun of you.
Well, if he has his own freedom of speech, then he
I
can
know.
respond any way he wants. Yeah, it's such a
Don't
slippery.
bring him up. I just don't like him.
I saw 2 rocket launches the other night, back to back.
Yeah, so that's like my freedom of speech. I don't like him.
I hate rockets. Okay.
No, I don't hate. Okay, maybe there are few people that I might say I hate, but no,
I'm glad
I
you said
just don't
that
like him.
because that reminded me. So should it be legal or illegal to hate? That's a horrible question, but we're just having academic discussion.
Are we having academic discussion? No, we're having a very light discussion. Let's not do it very academic. People will
Well,
get really bored
okay.
of
Well,
us.
we're having a discussion then. I
Yeah.
can.
But it's a research discussion. Oh, by
Okay.
the way, one of my friends, she told me that it's obvious that Greg is doing his research before discussing the topic. So, yeah, just wanted to bring the feedback. So,
Well,
that's really good. Like,
I hope that's the
that's
case. I
nice.
wouldn't want to just walk
Yeah.
into a room and say, "Hey, let's talk about
Yes, like going to the coffee and okay, what's the weather today?
let's talk about French literature and eat, I don't know, and not have any
No.
idea what French literature is." Of course, I have to,
Yes.
do a little bit of research, or you'll yell at me nonstop. But
No,
so
maybe
back to the question. The
maybe
question.
of the Korean literature, but not about French literature. But
So
if that was the case,
is hate allowed?
I know. I wanted to talk about this when we were talking about the US Constitution and the First Amendment, and Normally, in paper, everything is like you have full freedom of speech. And in some other countries, like in France or in other European countries, you have the freedom of speech is protected by the constitution, but you also cannot discriminate in your speech, discriminate or incite hate based on the race or based on gender is not there yet because apparently it's not so important, but anyway, or on other, I mean, maybe in some countries. So there is gender too. So there are some criteria that you cannot discriminate or incite hate. And as I said, I'm completely against hate speech, like it's inherent to me. But on the other side, I said choosing between the two, I would prefer to fight against hate speech with my freedom of speech rather than not having the freedom of speech. The problem that I have is that who is deciding what is the discrimination? This is changing from time to time.
I would
And
say from
also,
person to person as well.
yes, of course. And also, very often is being quite weaponized, or not weaponized because maybe I just, I'm kind of really having an inflation of this word, but it's being used by different governments in different ways. And I wanted to bring this last example of Germany. When, I don't know if you know the case of Francesca Albanese, she is the special rapporteur, the UN special rapporteur for Palestine. Even the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, he has defended her work several times, but anyway, that's not the issue. So we're not judging her work here. She was expected to have two key lectures in Germany, like recently, in Munich and in Berlin, and both lectures were cancelled.
Why?
Apparently, officially in Berlin was said that it was for security issues. And it was not only her lecture, it was her lecture together with a Jewish architect. And so they had to talk about Palestine, etc., etc. And so there is an increase, especially what this has been raised by several German academics, there is an increase of shutting off the voices of pro-Palestine people in Germany in the framework of, because they are framed as anti-Semite. And the Israeli embassy in Germany, they were against the two lectures of Francesca Albanese. So, first of all, to criticize the government of Israel, it's not anti-Semite, I believe. And also, Germany is one of the countries now, I mean, and I was looking at the data that you sent me yesterday about the countries regarding the freedom of speech and the countries where with the most, if we can say with the most freedom of speech, and Germany was in the 10th place. But on the other side, if we look at the newspapers, and there are several cases, and I don't know if it's because of this ongoing guilt, which on the other side it would be so paradoxical, because now we have the last elections in Germany showed that a party that apparently it's such a fan of Hitler, and so they are second in the elections. So, I mean, to still feel this guilt and on the other side to vote for a party that it's mostly proclaiming the same thing. So I have some really huge doubts there. But this kind of, especially canceling lectures or banning books, because I was thinking about this idea in Germany and also in some European countries. Hitler's book Mein Kampf has been banned, or is still banned, I'm not sure, but has been banned for many years.
Yeah, my understanding
It's
still in
real.
Germany, if you refuse the idea that the what is that called? I'm sorry, the atrocities that went on during
Holocaust.
the
Yeah,
Holocaust. If you oppose that, if you're a Holocaust denier, that's illegal in Germany, right? That's my understanding.
probably.
Yeah,
But
I think that's the case. If you
yeah,
if you if you advocate that that never happened, or you try to pass that message, or I guess any associated messages, then it's illegal. You'll be arrested. Which that seems to me, right, wrong, or indifferent, to be what I would consider a violation of the American First Amendment, or a violation of, at a minimum, free speech.
yeah.
That
And on the other
entire
side,
argument. I know that's a very, I think, hypocritical view of how we're going to make the rules. And yeah, so first I want to recognize that, yeah, that's from the Our World in Data .org website. There's a bunch of these websites. They basically index all the different countries and list which one, in this case, has the most freedom of speech. It's pretty interesting. I love these websites. Gather all this data and come up with metrics, because it's a great tool. Because if you have somebody that has a greater level of, in this case, freedom of speech, if you really care and you are from a country on the bottom of that list, you can look to who is going to improve your definition of what free speech is and how to improve your status. So I love these websites. I really do. You still haven't answered my question.
Which question?
Should hate speech be allowed? Should hate be allowed?
I mean, I think that I answered it since the beginning when I was talking about Andrew Tate, which is spreading all this hate speech against women.
He can spread his speech as long as he wants because it's his freedom of speech. That's your point.
I mean, my point is that as much as I cannot stand him for many principles, not because of
would you say
some,
that you hate him?
I don't hate anybody, but I would really what I would like is not so many young people to follow him. But on the other side, I think that if there are so many young people that are following him, something is wrong in our society. So can we maybe fill this space with another discussion and other discussion of ideas so he cannot be the influencer that he is? So that's my point, because it's so easy to say that he's the enemy. Yes, he's the enemy, maybe. But the problem is, how am I fighting this enemy?
That's definitely the paradox. That's the paradox we live with, because I bet I could come up with several lists of people that you hate, even though you say you don't hate. Do you hate murderers? Do you hate child abusers? Do you hate people that don't pay their taxes? I mean, maybe that one's not such a big deal, but I think those.
Maybe for me that's really important because I want people to pay taxes because our social welfare states are based on taxes.
My point is that there are probably some people that you do hate. There's people I hate too. I'm no angel. I hate people that don't, want me to I don't know. I could figure this out somebody. I hate murderers, how about that? But if you're allowed to hate, are you allowed free or the freedom to hate in speech? And that is such a paradox to the idea that people want to have laws against hate speech. And I just can't figure out a way to say you can say anything you want, but here are the exceptions, and make that sound good. Because you can't say you can say everything you want, but here are the exceptions. Because then you don't have free speech. So the answer to the first question we started with, do we have free speech? No.
No.
We don't. We have limited speech.
There is no free speech. And I still think that, as I said, as much as I would really like people to not be racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, etc., so whatever. I mean, I can make a list of everything. On the other side, I don't think that having these different categories included in the hate speech, or just having them there in the law, hasn't shown any result or any sustainable result. And
I would disagree with that.
Why?
Because
what's the results?
I think the contrary is true. I think that there has been a slow and steady restriction on speech. And every time we come up with a good idea for why free speech should be stymied or stifled, we end up with having more rules of what you can't say. So the progression shows that free speech is dying one day at a time, to the point where you're not going to be free to say anything you want. I know you talk about cancel culture all the time, and clearly speech is the trigger for cancel culture. I say something you don't want me to say, the first thing that you're going to do is say, hey, let's get that guy off the internet. Let's stop him from talking. Let's get those Tate brothers and get them the hell out of here. So that is the only trend progression that I can see for speech is that it is being limited every single day to a point where we're not going to have any semblance of what is currently considered freedom of speech.
When I was saying about results, it was in results in reducing sexism or reducing racism. So that was the result that I was referring. And I mean, as a person or as a woman, I am again quite inherently against cancel culture in the sense that I think that I've been canceled so much. I mean, not me, I mean, me including many times, but not much me, but so many other women or other people or other men. So, I mean, this is something that I can absolutely not defend. On the other side, not talking about like freedom of speech for a second in that sense, I would say that, I find that some people are very sensitive or sensible to this cancel culture when personally I've suffered so much and I'm still alive.
Well, what do you
Yeah.
mean? Sensible and sensitive could have opposite
No, in
meanings.
the sense that they are just jumping out and against cancel culture. Why were not jumping against cancel culture some years ago where when we had women that were being canceled? So, I mean, I think that this is a kind of a very hypocritical thing. So, just jumping to the defense of a comedian who has been canceled, I mean, maybe for some months. So it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I know which instance you're referring
Yeah.
to, but
No, many cases. But again, I said that I am completely against any kind of cancel culture because if there is a sexist comedian there, it can also be a very famous feminist comedian. So for me, that would be the right thing to do.
I would
So,
say I do agree with that. But to cement that idea, I would say that cancel culture is synonymous with the violation of free speech. And maybe that's your exact
yeah,
point. That's your exact point.
yes.
I just want to lay it out in one sentence, because you just talk a lot. I'm just joking.
No, because I have my English is like this, and also you
Well,
know that I'm not structured, and that's why you are there
what do you
to
think about
keep
the
things
idea
in.
of universities that have lists of words that they call inappropriate speech or speech that is, it's cautious. You need to, use those words sparingly or not, if not at all. I had a good list here earlier. Of college banned words. Let's see. 2025 banished words list. That's not it. What are canceled words? No, no, no. This isn't a good one. So I was looking at the article, and
I know what you mean.
there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of words that specify people's characteristics, like unintelligent or poor, and they
Poor.
say these words shouldn't be used because they're specifying an individual characteristic. But at some point, don't we need words to be honest on how we're reporting the our environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of these banned word, if I could say,
I just
it
said that.
relates to the no, no. It mostly relates to the fact that most of them they have a very negative connotation and they must may be insulting. I don't know. I'm using a word that I hate to use, like retarded, I think. And I think that this is the first time that I have ever used it, both in English and even in Albanian, if I could, or in any other language. But, and now mostly, not mostly, but we use persons with disabilities because there is like an evolution of the concept that we have about persons with different disabilities. So it can also be used as a kind of a violation of the freedom of speech. But on the other side, I think that if it's well explained why we are using this word, I think that the majority of people would agree not to use like an offensive word, but to use persons with disabilities. So I'm just taking this example just this example. And
So you advocate for political correctness.
not the political correctness in the sense that you use it, because I'm sure that you're mocking me now, but
Not
in
at
the
all.
sense
Not at
of,
all. I mean, why would you say that?
no, because yeah, political correctness and the left wing and the feminist, I know,
Well,
like it's a whole package.
The reason I said
I know.
political correctness is because that's one of the phrases that was
I
banned
know.
by particular schools. It's like, okay, we can't even say what we're trying to say we're not saying. Oh my God, it's
No, no.
ridiculous.
No, I think that everything that goes to the extreme for me, it's really bad. I mean, especially when it's a kind of absolutist. In these absolutist terms, it's even worse.
I don't know what that
Like
word
you
was.
can
What was that last word? Absolutist?
absolute
Absolutist.
yeah, so yeah, absolutist. So it's even worse in the sense that you cannot use this word because I want you to not use it. No, I mean, not we, but things have to be explained. Why? Because the language is a social construction, so the language changes. And if you or me or like we want our language to evolve and to reflect the evolution of the society, there are some explanation that have to go together with it. So it cannot be something arbitrary because there will be no effect. People will not understand why we are not using or why we are using this word. On the other side, and I think that this is something that really hurts my heart on the ban things, it's the banning of the books. I mean, US is being like the champion for the moment, but I was reading some examples also in the UK that they are banning some books. And I think that this is
Don't get me started on them UK people.
not going, we don't have time to go to UK
I heard
today,
they're
next time
arresting
maybe.
people for praying. My goodness.
Okay.
And that Starmer, that guy, he needs to read some books or something. That guy's
Not
ridiculous.
going to talk about you. But I mean, the banning of the books, I think, I mean, I took the extreme example of, Mein Kampf. So they banned Mein Kampf, but it didn't erase people to like idolize or Hitler. So you cannot ban books. If a book is offensive for the today's society, maybe it's better to explain why, or I mean
Yeah.
teach to students or take some times. But I think, and we were discussing about this, the problem that we have now is like taking things, finding the easiest way, and it's like we don't have time in order to reflect and to teach and to talk and to make people aware, but just finding the easiest solution. Okay, let's decide this and that's it. So, and it's a pity. And again, I'm very idealistic and I would like things to change. I'm not sure if they will change, but yeah, I
You have some
have to
good points
do.
there. And I'm not even mocking you all the way, but those are some good points. I,
That's such a
so
great achievement.
absolutely disagree with the idea of banning books because that's
I
classic,
know.
1984 appendix.
Yep.
Let's reduce our dictionary to only the words that advocate the good things that we're saying about the government. I totally agree banning books is wrong, but I also think banning words is wrong. I mean, when we say we can't say the word retard, it used to have an entirely different meaning. I don't
I
want to
know.
use it to address it to any individual to disparage them. That's not my intent. However, I shouldn't be told that it's illegal to say the word. That's an infringement. There has to be some place, and I think your methodology is actually the best. Don't let the words you're using find themselves in an extreme environment. I think that's kind of what you said. Don't use them in extreme occasions. Don't use them when they're negatively affecting others. But still, let's not throw everything that we've collected and developed away, even if
I
it's
mean, I've had this experience as a teacher with a student. He first time that I was teaching feminist theory at the university in Tirana, and he came to the class very like fighting against feminism, and he said that I'm an anti-feminist, and I said, "What do you mean by it? By I mean, do you know what a feminist is?" So we started to talk about the concept. And then at the end, I mean, it's not that he became a feminist, but he said, "Oh, I had a completely different understanding." So, I mean, I know that not everybody will have the time to go and talk and explain, etc., etc. And also, you have to know some things and to have research, but at least, I mean, I think that this is the best that I can do. Take the time and talk and not shut down. I mean, if I didn't believe in freedom of speech, I wouldn't talk to most of the people that I know that are not
yeah.
feminists.
I'm not talking to you. All right. Well, I think those are some great
So
points, honestly. I really do. I'm actually glad that you shared them with me. So thank you for that. And I'll
thank you.
try to try to make fun of you later on sometime. I'll get back. All right. Hey, thanks. Well,
Thank
I
you.
think it's a good talk. We probably have a lot more to say about it. I am interested on hearing what other people have to say about it. So if anybody wants to comment, please do. I would like to hear that. And if you want to make fun of Mira, go ahead too.
Yeah, and that would be great if it was public because like people are just texting us and saying things and I mean, can you just comment on our Spotify? So that would be better.
All right. Let's let
Yeah.
them have their own freedoms to speech as well. All right.
Yes, yes, that's true.
Bye.
Okay, see you next time.